Good morning. Of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. It's been a crazy 24 hours. We've had signing day. We had a staff change, a major one on CSU Football. The Rams have dismissed Freddie Banks as defensive coordinator, which is what I'm going to talk about here in the intro. Going to give some takeaways from a big-time home win for CSU men's hoops over Loyola Marymount. Really dominant performance. I expected a much tighter game than we ended up getting. We'll talk about that. Some of the keys. I'll play a clip from Norvell's press conference yesterday and give my initial reaction to this 2025 signing class. Not the biggest class in the world, only 13 signees, significantly smaller than the last couple of years. Anticipate a pretty heavy portal cycle this time around. We'll get into all of that fun stuff here. Hope everybody has had a good week coming out of the holiday. It's always a little bit weird, I feel like, but a lot going on, so a lot to get into. We're going to start by talking about the situation here with Freddie Banks being dismissed. If you've listened to the show, not a shocker to you. This is something I've kind of been hinting at now for a couple of weeks. I anticipated that regardless of how this season went, Freddie Banks would be moving on in one way or the other, whether that be because he chose to leave, because he got a different job, or just because Jay Norvell elected to make a change. I'll start with the timing of it, which Jacob asks about in the Toyota chat. If you guys wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. And I get that. I think Freddie was probably even surprised by the timing of it somewhat, but it's a situation where you're doing right by him in the end. I've talked about how the relationship between Freddie Banks and Jay Norvell over the last couple of years has been icy at best. They just have not been on the same page. I think there's been some resentment both ways, to be honest. Jay Norvell's been pretty open about feeling like they needed to change offensive philosophies this year, in part because of the personnel that they had on that side of the ball. It benefited them to run the ball more, limit turnovers and all that, but also because they felt like they needed to kind of take some of the pressure off of the defense. The thing about the air raid is, while it's explosive, and we saw CSU put up significantly more points per game last year, I was also a lot more volatile. There's a lot more instances of 3-and-outs where you have multiple incompletions, only taking 45 seconds off. And if you don't have the defense to complement that style of offense, it can put you in a pretty disadvantageous position pretty quickly. That happened to the Rams. They struggled to close out games in 2023. You ended up blowing games that you took the lead late in against CU and UNLV. Hawaii was frustrating as well. And I think there was just kind of a little bit of resentment on both sides. I think there was frustration with both sides. You know, if you're the offense, you're looking at the defense being like, man, can't you just get a stop late? And if you're the defense, you're being like, man, you keep putting us in bad field position. We're constantly, going back out on the field and on short rest. And there was just kind of a disconnect there. I think they did a decent job of making it work throughout this season. Obviously, the defense performed well in the league slate, at least. They led the Mountain West in scoring defense against, league competition. Pretty similar, I feel like, to what we saw in 2022, where the defense was really good in the conference slate after kind of a rough start against the non-conference competition there. Ultimately, this was a long time in the making. This was essentially inevitable, in my opinion. The reason that you do it before the bowl game is because it gives Freddie Banks an opportunity to land on his feet. Very similarly to why a lot of these players elect to enter the transfer portal ahead of the bowl game, is that because spots fill up quick, jobs fill quickly. And even if Norvell is not crazy about Freddie Banks, even if the relationship isn't great, he's not the kind of guy to be vengeful and totally fuck him over. This is about him being able to land on his own feet, which I think he'll be able to do because statistically speaking, the defense did have a pretty good year. I think it's a fair argument that you could point out that against some of the better quarterbacks, especially CU and Texas, but even in the league slate, San Jose State, New Mexico, Utah State, and Fresno, they all move the ball pretty well against CSU, especially through the air. I do feel like they were better situationally. The 4-minute defense was better this year. Red zone defense, at least as the season went on, got a lot better. It started kind of rough there, but it did improve as the season went on. The defense in a lot of these games was a major reason why the Rams were able to come out on top. The reason I think this move makes sense at this juncture, you've got a lot of veterans that are moving on at this point. It kind of makes sense timing wise, just in terms of you've got the Pac-12 move looming. You're hoping to kind of catapult the success that you've had this season or catapult off of the success you've had this season, I should say, and really keep this thing going. But if you're going to make some type of push, if you're going to be a team that competes at the highest level and, potentially pushes for the college football playoff, I mean, Boise's going to be in the playoff. That's the hope that you have at this stage. You've got to have a staff that's completely in lockstep. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And if the relationship wasn't great, it doesn't make a lot of sense going into this pivotal year 4. And that's what this is. I mean, they got to follow up next year with a season that, in my opinion, improves on what you've established this year. This was kind of the foundation. You finally got over the hump. You beat some rivals. You produced the first 8-win season in a decade, but you still kind of came up short when the lights were brightest in some of those big moments. The hope is you take it to the next level and, you have even more success in the coming years. But I just don't think that's really possible if you're a defensive coordinator and your head coach / OC, because Jay calls the plays, are beefing behind the scenes. So it was just time for a change at this point. It makes a lot of sense given the veterans that are moving on. You don't put them in a bad spot where they're all having to play in like their 4th system in their career. I think it did make sense to ride it out this year from that standpoint, and obviously from a financial standpoint, because Freddie did get a raise after 2022. I fully anticipate that he'll get another job, whether it be as like a secondary coach somewhere in the P4, maybe a defensive coordinator at this level or potentially lower. He obviously had some success at the FCS level before he came to CSU. I just think it makes sense timing wise, and it was just kind of an inevitable move. So those are my 2 cents on the situation. I'm not trying to rip on him or anything like that. I just feel like it was a situation that was not going to be resolved. It was a relationship that had seen its better days, and it was just time to move on for both sides. We're going to keep this going. I'm going to get into some takeaways. We're going to talk about a big-time basketball win, and then I'm going to give my instant reaction to the 2025 signees. I'll talk about some of these signees more individually and in-depth tomorrow as well. We'll really kind of talk about some of their attributes and what they bring to the table. But today we'll keep it a little bit more general, talk about some general takeaways on this class. I'll give some thoughts on local recruiting. That's certainly been a conversation online, as it always is at this time of year. We are going to take a break real quick because I do want to shout out our homies, the partners that make all of this possible. Starting with our friends at Coors Light, who encourage you to choose a chill mindset. Guys, life can be stressful. I'm about to move for the second time in 6 months. That's a process. I'm going to have to rebuild the entire home setup again, which I'm not looking forward to. Although I am going to take it to the next level. I've got some stuff that I'm looking forward to putting up that I haven't been able to display yet. But between work, social media, chaos, it can get stressful. It can get chaotic. It's all about choosing a chill mindset and rising above. Once you're kicking back, once you're chilling, crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill. Crack open a Coors Light. Make the most out of the times you choose chill and choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also want to talk to you guys about Game Time. Game Time has this awesome new feature It's called Game Time Picks. What it does is it makes getting tickets to your favorite events that much easier. Game Time is all about convenience and improving the ticket buying experience for the consumer. But with Game Time Picks, they take it to the next level because it filters out all the fluff. The thing about Game Time is they have such an incredible variety. They have so many tickets, so much to offer. That can be a bit overwhelming if you're in a scramble, if you're trying to get tickets on the go. You might be standing outside the arena, for instance. Game Time Picks just going to show you the best of the best. They have the most flexible process in terms of customer service. Maybe life comes up and you're not able to go. It's fine. They'll work with you. The lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a ticket somewhere in the same section, same row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's move on for a little bit. Let's talk hoops before we go full circle. Get back into football. We'll talk about that 2025 class. We'll talk about the final Mountain West power ranking ahead of bowl season. It is a big weekend coming up, though. We've got football championship weekend. We've got the game in Boulder for CSU men's basketball. Always a fun matchup. Nique's return to Boulder, I think, is going to be cool. He has been incredible. He was awesome in this game. 19 points, 17 rebounds, a career high for him. He had a double-double in the first half with 5 assists, was flirting with the program's first ever triple-double. That's a bit of a tongue twister. He didn't end up getting there in the end, but he has just been tremendous. That was one of the things I wrote about in my post-game takeaways, is that Nique Clifford has made himself some money. He tested the NBA draft waters this past spring. I think he very easily could have been a first-round pick because his athleticism, his skill set, it translates. He does have some things that he could refine a little bit. His handle's still probably not NBA level, but man, he has just been awesome. His shot making has been spectacular. He's stretching the floor. He's been really heady in terms of the playmaking that he's displaying. He's getting to the hoop. He's finishing off the glass, knocking down tough jumpers, doing everything you need. And then on the glass, I mean, he has just been an animal. And I think that's, to me, what has stood out the most about CSU over this 3-game stretch. Does feel like they've turned a corner here after you got punked in your own building by UC Riverside. What frustrated me about that loss to UC Riverside so much more so than the actual outcome, or even giving up a circus shot to force overtime, was the fact that they really got out hustled. They got punked in their own building. They got out physicaled on the glass. I mean, they were like plus or minus 20 or something like that in rebounding disparity in the game. I mean, it was embarrassing. And these last 3 games, CSU has been significantly better. And I think there's a couple of factors there. I think effort and attention to detail has been better. And I asked the players about that last night. You can see their whole post-game session at DNVR_Rams on X. You can get into all of that. Got some perspective from Nique Clifford and Kyan Evans, both of which scored in double-digit figures, both of which were awesome. They talked about how there has been an emphasis for sure, and Medved mentioned some of that as well. But it's just a mindset is really what it comes down to. You've got to want to rebound. And I think having this rotation has been beneficial. I think guys like Kyle Jorgensen are really intriguing. His skill set is very high, especially on the offensive side. He's a little bit lost defensively at the moment, which makes sense. He's a freshman. He's got to figure it out. He's got to have more of a desire to rebound, especially if they're going to play him more as the season goes on. But having Bemba out there, I just think it changes everything with the rotation on both ends of the floor. I think his presence physically is so important. It gives this team a little bit of an attitude. When he was not in the picture, Jalen Crocker-Johnson was really the only guy that was putting his head down and getting to the hoop. Nique would have loved to, but he was getting doubled and tripled at times because of that spacing. They were having to play 4-on-5 offensively a lot of the time. And now with Bemba back in the lineup, even for 20 minutes a game, it just makes this rotation so much smoother. The spacing is better offensively. Him down low. I felt like last night, he started the game by making back-to-back buckets down low in the post, was really patient. That's been a big key for him as well. Last year would rush the process a little bit. And I think he's just kind of realized, I have the skill, I have the touch, I'm bigger, I'm stronger. than 95% of the post defenders that he's going to have to go up against. He'll go up against some guys with legit size in the league slate, but especially in a game like this, you've got the physical advantage. Just be patient, wait it out, finish over your defender. He did that back-to-back times to get the offense flowing for CSU. Really, both teams were a little bit sluggish out of the gate. Both teams turned the ball on their first possession, and I think it took 2.5 minutes for either team to find the bottom of the net. But once Bemba kind of settled in there in the post with a couple of big buckets, I felt like that really intimidated LMU, and then they started really loading up in the post there and trying to basically prevent that from happening again. And as a result, you got a ton of open shots from the perimeter, which was nice. They hit them, which was cool. They hit a season high 14 threes, 11 threes in the first half. They really established a big lead and kind of took control of this game early. I wondered coming out of the break, what would the mentality be like? Sometimes that can be a bit of a blessing and a curse when you knock down a bunch of open threes early. You can then tend to settle. The thing is LMU was giving them those jump shots, and there were maybe some stretches where I felt like they got a little bit three happy, taking shots early in the clock. But if you're standing wide open, it's in rhythm, there's not a dude within 5 feet of you, it's hard to fault these guys for putting up those shots because that's a good look. By every objective measure, that is an open, good look. It's a high-quality shot. You can't really fault them. The big difference in this one was they knocked him down. I thought LMU would shoot the ball a whole lot better than they did. They were 4 of 21 from deep. I don't think Jevin Porter is going to be joining his brother Mike in the NBA, 1 of 10 from the floor in that game for Michael Porter Jr.'s younger brother on LMU. We also saw a former San Jose State player, Myron Amy, in that one. He didn't have a great game either, to be honest. LMU just looked rough. But I felt like CSU really dictated the tone in this game. It started on the defensive side. They made LMU work really hard for everything that they got in this. The numbers ended up being great. Held them to 33% from the floor in that first half, 34% in the second half, 34% overall, just 19% from deep. That's how it's got to be for CSU. You've got to create opportunities for yourself by getting stops, and then you've got to capitalize on those defensive stops by finishing the possessions with rebounds. And they weren't doing that early on in the year. They're doing it now. It's been big. Sure, the shot making helps, and the numbers are starting to even out for some of these guys. Kyan Evan comes into this game shooting 19% from deep. I don't feel like his shot selection has ever really been poor. He's not a guy that is just going to jack up 6-7 shots for the sake of it. I mean, he really does work for quality looks. They were giving him. To his credit, he knocked him down with 4 of 5, career high 4 threes in this one. I thought he was huge. He's been really good on the defensive side throughout the season. Offensively, struggled to score. If he can do this, though, just on a consistent basis, like he doesn't need to be Isaiah Stevens going for 30, but if he can give you 12 to 14, knock down the open shots when they're there, take those open driving lanes when they're available, it's going to be so big for the spacing. It takes some of the stress off of Nique and Jalen Lake, who have really been shouldering a lot of the offensive burden here to begin the season. And it just kind of feels like as a team, this group is finding their rhythm a little bit. Certain guys are starting to knock down shots more. We just talked about Kyan, but Bowen Bourne has been better. He hit another 3. I think he's had multiple threes in 3 of the last 5 after starting slow. These guys aren't going to necessarily shoot north of 40% from deep, but they weren't going to be sub 20 for the entire season ever either. Good Lord. I really like this shot selection in this game. I felt like this was the best that CSU looked on both sides of the ball. And I feel like it was a big moment to establish a little bit of a rhythm, get some confidence going into that matchup against CU and Boulder this weekend. Feels like if you could back up what you did in that MTE with a road win over CU here and even a really competitive performance against VCU, a win would go a long ways there. I mean, if you could rattle a win streak here going into the league slate, it's going to really drastically improve your metrics. It's going to put you in a lot better position in terms of, competing for an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. They've got a lot of work to do there to kind of make up some ground after the slow start. But I do feel like this team is figuring it out. And I think you can make an argument that as fun as last year was, that team peaked in early to mid-December. And this team, I think they're going to peak come March, which is, when you want to. Obviously, health is a big factor there. Isaiah being slowed down by injuries was a massive factor in the offensive struggles against Texas and the NCAA tournament. That's a whole different conversation there. But they're figuring it out. And I think this team is growing a lot. I do think they have potential. Some of these transfers starting to knock down more shots would be big. Keyshawn Williams, I thought, had a nice stretch offensively off the bench there. He's one of the few guys that can kind of get out and run on teams. And I think the change of pace is beneficial. Whereas, Cayenne maybe a little bit more methodical, especially like in the half court there. I think he's a really savvy player. I'm excited about these guards. But it took some time for them to figure it out. I think they've got an opportunity here, especially if they can continue to knock down open threes. If they rebound the way that they have these last 3 games, they had 17 second chance points last night, 21 bench points. They won the little areas, and it's why this game really didn't end up being close. And that's a testament to the effort that these guys put forth. Jalen Lake had 4 threes. He continues to shoot the hell out of the ball. Another really solid performance from him. Cayenne was great. To me, though, very clearly, Nique Clifford, the player of the game. He had 19 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists. Has just been really big time. He was dominant in this win over LMU, and I think he has made himself a whole bunch of money here over the last month. And if he continues to play the way that he's playing, he's going to be a top 20 NBA pick. Maybe even like a lottery pick if he could really go off because of that athletic profile. It's going to translate. It's going to be really appealing at the next level there. All right, let's get into the recruiting. Let's move on. I'm going to obviously talk more basketball. Make sure you keep an eye out on the written content here. I've been a little behind on the basketball side, admittedly, just because we've had so much going on with football and recruiting and bowl season and big games, but I'm excited to get into the thick of it. Really, as we get towards the holidays here is when the intensity starts to pick up. We had the first league games last night. I think it was good that CSU didn't have to go to the Pit or Utah State or something like this at this stage of the season. I would rather play them a couple weeks from now than right now, especially as this team continues to grow. We're going to play a video here of Jay Norvell kind of talking about the 2025 class to set the scene. And then I'm going to give you guys my instant reaction to this 2025 signing class, which features 13 high school signees at the moment. They anticipate another 15 or so transfers. We'll get into all of it, but here is Jay Norvell at his press conference yesterday. You can watch the entire 25-plus minute at DNVR_Rams.
We have an amazing campus and city and facilities. When these kids come, they're incredibly impressed with what CSU has to offer. And we are so proud to show them the town, show our great community, our great campus. And we have amazing people, from the people that work here in campus to our academic people on campus to the people in the restaurants downtown when we show them around. They just have an amazing couple of days. And so just really excited to talk about these guys. We have guys from 8 different states and 1 other country besides the United States. 3 from Texas, 2 from Arizona, 2 from California. We got 1 kid from Alabama, 1 kid from Georgia, 1 from the state of Nevada, 1 from Missouri, 1 from Tennessee, and we have a new player from Australia, another punter following Patty's footsteps. As far as position breakdown, we've got 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, 2 receivers, 2 safeties, 1 tight end, a running back, a linebacker, a kicker, and a punter. And within that group, 10 of those guys are dual sport athletes. And we love the versatility of dual sport athletes. We got a great player in Jackson Murray, the Arizona 5A Northeast Valley Regional Defensive Player of the Year, defensive tackle. Clarence Taylor led the state of Alabama in reception yards as a junior. Incredible high school career, 119 receptions, 2,500 yards, 35 touchdowns. You know, the type of talented receiver that we're used to getting here. Cannon Valenzuela, Texas 3A All-State, second team as a junior. A great all-around player. Plays offense, plays linebacker, just the type of guy that we want to grow into one of our defensive stalwarts. So Javion Kennard ended his career with 4,139 all-purpose yards and 44 touchdowns as a running back. And just so excited about him and this class. We're not done yet. We still have the ability to recruit high school players in January when we're able to go out on the road again. And we will be active in the transfer portal. You know, we're looking at, I don't know, somewhere around 15, 16 kids that we may bring in the transfer portal. And we've got some really quality seniors that are leaving the program. You know, we'll be looking for possibly a couple of tight ends, a running back, a receiver, defensive tackle. We'll be looking for some kids in the portal, safety, and we'll also be looking at offensive line. And that opens up on Monday, so there's plenty to do right now. Our football offices are buzzing and very busy. Our kids are working out and lifting this week and getting stronger. And there's a lot of activity. I just talked to them in the weight room, in that weight room. So we're excited about the future of CSU football and the talent that we continue to bring in. You know, just one point about philosophy before I open it up for questions. The high school recruitment, as far as feeding our program, is very similar to the draft in the NFL. We want to build our program through high school recruiting. We feel like we have the best evaluation, talent, character, academics of the player from the high school ranks. And we want to build our program off of a strong recruiting base in high school, coming out of high school. Obviously, the portal is the reality of where we're at in college football. We'll always be mindful of those guys, but the portal is like free agency, okay? And you don't want to build we don't want to build our program through the portal, but we will supplement the portal in areas of need and where we're thin or have lack of experience. And so we're excited to get involved in that. And we've had some success in the portal because we have a very specific way that we go about our business in the portal. So really proud of this group. We think these guys can be very good players for years to come at CSU. And I think the other thing is we just finished a season where we were 8-4, and the recruits that we've had the last couple of years, you're starting to see those guys really start to contribute in our program and emulate the qualities of toughness, physicality, hard playing effort that we want to build in this program. So really excited about this next crop of young kids.
Jay,
All right, a lot to get into there. I thought that was really astute stuff. All right, I just appreciate how insightful Jay Norvell is when it comes to the team building process. And I say this not to pat myself on the back or anything like that, but I do think that one of the things that helped win me over with this current staff to an extent, it's a working relationship. They're never going to love everything I say, and at times I'm going to disagree with some of their decisions, but that's how this process works. They've always been really great with the access that they give. They give a lot of insight into the recruiting process, which was something that was just not the case in the previous regimes. It has allowed me to keep you guys more informed with, kind of what they're thinking when they build these teams. And one of the things that I've talked about really consistently going back to 2022 is that the foundation of this team has got to be built through the high school level. And it is. When you look at the future of this program and you look at some of the rising stars, guys like Tanner Morley in the trenches offensively, defensively, you got Owen Long really has burst out onto the scene. Jet Vincent, Drew Rodriguez, some of these guys, the sophomores and even some freshmen in certain cases that are seeing the field. That's all really encouraging. And I think a lot of the players that they signed in this class, very much like the last couple years, they're going to translate athletically. Now, I know the totals are less. It's going to be a little bit smaller high school class, and that's why at the moment it ranks lower than some of the other schools in the Mountain West, because those schools signed like 22, 23 players versus CSU signing 13. That heavily influences the average, and it'll come up. I'll just say recruiting rankings are imperfect for a whole bunch of reasons. I don't need to get into that whole debate, but I would argue, like, how locked in are they on some of these prospects, especially for Mountain West schools, and especially when some of the high school prospects are coming from smaller programs, not in necessarily, like Dallas or something like that. But I just think the staff has done a really good job of going out and finding guys with athletic traits that are going to translate. And multi-sport athletes have obviously been a big emphasis for this team, and it's been highly successful for CSU to this regard, or to this point. A lot of the guys are panning out, and it's been encouraging. I just think that they fundamentally have a very sound approach to recruiting, and they stick to it. They're looking for guys that are going to have the explosive traits, the size that they're looking for, and not necessarily, a ton of experience or 8 million stats or recruiting stars or anything like that. It's not about that. It's about trying to find the right guys athletically and then putting them in roles where they're able to succeed. For instance, you take a guy like Cannon Valenzuela, who is probably, or I don't want to say he's my favorite because I like a lot of these signings, but he's up there for me. He's a guy that I'm really excited about in this signing class. I think he's a steal. 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a wide receiver, big time playmaker. He played safety and he's a good athlete. He's got great ball skills. He is the guy that you put at linebacker, and he's just going to have a natural feel for the game. He's going to go out there and be rangy from sideline to sideline and make plays. And that's exactly what they did with Owen Long. Owen Long was like a running back, and he played a little bit of in the secondary as well. And they're having success finding guys and putting them in those roles there. And I just think it's going to work out in the long run. I do think you are going to have to fill some holes this year via the portal. And that's just largely because of the amount of starters that you're losing on both sides of the ball that are seniors. You're basically losing your entire secondary. You're losing 3 of your 5 starting offensive linemen. Like, that's going to be tough, and they're going to have to be able to hit on some transfers to be able to maintain this and to be able to build off of what they did this season. But I think the foundation of the roster, which comes from the high school level, the staff is doing a really good job of signing guys that are going to translate. Before I kind of run through the class here, I will give just a couple of thoughts on the local aspect. They don't have a local signee at the moment. I do anticipate that they'll get a couple actually this year, but at least one through the transfer portal. CSU needs to be the landing spot for the kids that do come out of Colorado, ultimately elect to go P4, maybe don't make it work there and want to come home. Kind of like Gabe Kershke with Wisconsin. We've seen it work for CSU on the soccer side because there's a lot of talent that gets out of this state. And the tough part about the local recruiting debate, and I want to be, it's just, I understand why people romanticize it. I love high school football. I love Colorado high school football. I'm rooting for all these kids to succeed. I think it's really fun when you have Colorado kids that go on to be prominent members of the program. I think there's a different level of buy-in if you grew up, following the program and really take pride in wanting to represent the Rams from the minute you got there. It's not just where you went out of necessity. It's a place you truly desire to go. I think there's something to that. I also think it's fair to say that a lot of years, there's not 20 D1 kids coming out of this state. There might be 5 to 10 that are going to be starters at the D1 level. And a lot of them, especially when they're in the trenches, CSU is in on early. They tend to be, the first offers for a lot of, especially the offensive linemen that come out. I think Bill Best does a good job of recruiting local offensive linemen. They have not recruited skill players quite as frequently, and I understand there's been some frustration there. But if you're CSU and you look at the caliber of athlete that you're signing out of California, Texas, and Arizona, I get what the staff is doing, especially in a cycle like 2025, where frankly it's pretty down locally. This is not the banner year. 2026 looks tremendous. There's like 4 or 5 guys that I think are going to be legit, and Mason Bonner, tight end out of Mullen, is one of them. But I don't know. You got to have a local presence, but you've also got to sign the right kids. You can't sign Colorado kids for the sake of signing Colorado kids. It's got to be people that you genuinely believe are going to translate. And I think there are some guys that are sometimes fringe, and CSU tends to try and convince those guys to go the PWO route. And if you come on as a walk-on and you prove yourself, they'll give you that opportunity. They'll give you a scholarship. If you're not willing, then I think they're willing to gamble on some areas where it's maybe a little bit more talent rich, and where statistically speaking, at least, you're a little bit more likely to find a guy that's going to be a starter for you at this level. And that's not to be dismissive of Colorado high school football or take shots at anybody, but it's also a situation where you've got to be realistic, because this isn't Texas, this isn't Southern California, this isn't Florida, or even like the Phoenix area or something like that, where it's kind of a hotbed for football talent. There are some really talented guys that come out of this state, and we've seen them go on to have incredible careers. But really, it's a numbers game. And I think a couple years ago, Norvell said you got to fish where the fish are, and that's really what it comes down to. Now, I think they could probably benefit by having either a position coach or a staffer in the recruiting department that has local ties to maybe maintain some of those local relationships a little bit better. I think that's maybe a fair critique that some of these local high school coaches have. It's not necessarily that they're not signing all their guys. It's that they're, kind of overlooking them at times. They're not, really talking to them unless there's a gem in the program. Like some of these Colorado coaches, they admittedly get in their feelings a little bit, and that's part of the process. You've got to maintain those relationships. You got to have them feel like you're being valued, so that when they do have somebody that is going to translate, they're in your corner and they're trying to send them your way. But it's a process, and it's a balance. And I just think at times people kind of romanticize it, and they don't add the important context of, well, okay, they didn't sign any kids locally, but what caliber of athlete did they sign? Are they bringing in talented players? Yes, they are. They're hitting on their high school players right now. And if that's the case, I just don't think you can really gripe all that much. You want that Colorado presence for sure. But again, it's a balance. So that's my 2 cents on it. I'm not trying to argue with people or say it's not important, because it is important. But so is just adding the most talent that you can. And much like the NFL draft, you're just trying to stockpile guys with traits that are going to translate. And I think the staff is doing a good job of that. Kind of running through this class here. And again, we'll talk about some of these guys individually a little bit more in depth tomorrow. This probably could have been a 2-hour live broadcast with everything that we've got going on with hoops and recruiting and bowl season and coaching changes and Lions and Tigers and Bears. Oh my. But CSU signed 2 specialists. That also is going to lower the recruiting rankings, because those guys don't tend to have much attention from 247 or any of those sites on 3. They brought in Dylan Freebury, who has a long of 47 yards, 6 foot, 175-pound kicker out of California. He's considered a top 20 kicker nationally by those rankings, though, so maybe an intriguing signing there. You're going to need a kicker, obviously. Nathan Sutcliffe, they went back to Australia for the punter, 6'6", 245, with an Aussie rules football background. I like the sound of that. Sounds like a guy you could run a fake or two with. Admittedly, have found almost nothing about Sutcliffe on the internet. The dude seems to be a ghost. So he's a guy we're going to have to kind of evaluate when he gets here. But Pro Kick Australia obviously has a great track record with it translating. Feels like half the kickers and punters in college football these days are from Australia. Getting into the offensive linemen, I would say that would be my first takeaway with this class, is that in the trenches, I really like the guys that they added. Maybe a little bit under the radar, not from the biggest programs in the world. Kentez Allen out of McDonough, Georgia, had an offer from Army, had an offer from Georgia State. He was one of CSU's first commits, 6'2", 295, got a good frame. Like what he brings to the table. I'm really excited about the defensive lineman. I think Jackson Murray and Caden Branson out of Arizona, both of which are going to be studs. I think they have versatility. Branston maybe more of an end. Murray's a guy who's kind of dominated the interior there. I've seen a lot of recruiting experts in the state of Arizona kind of say that Murray and Branston are two of the biggest steals. So doing a nice job there. Chad Savage has got a ton of ties in that Phoenix area. They're paying off for the Rams. He's got a ton of ties in California, which have been big as well. They go out and get Sione Natane, 6'3", 315 pounds. He's a guy that's got a versatile athletic profile. All these guys do. And I just think it's intriguing to bring guys in that are well-rounded physically like that, can just move in different ways, especially like basketball, I think translates so well to football. And just some of the lateral movement and refining some of that stuff is big. And it's a big reason why I argue against specialization at a young age for a lot of these guys. I mean, unless you're going to be a 5-star quarterback or something, I think it does more harm than good. Tight end, Brock Camp, 6'5", 250. Speaking of two-way guys that ball out, he had over 1,000 points in basketball, was recruited to play both sports, ends up at CSU. I think the Rams will probably look at adding a tight end via the portal as well. And obviously you're hoping that Jackson Warren is able to get healthy. He's a guy who they were very high on coming into the year. The receivers, they're not a ton of them. They lost a couple to Power 4 schools that committed in the summer and then ended up flipping. That's part of the process. But Antoine Martin Jr. out of Houston, Texas, Iowa Colony High School, averaged 21 yards a reception. He is a burner. Norvell talks about it in his video there. But the receiver out of Alabama, Clarence Taylor, not the biggest guy in the world, 5'11", 150, probably why he didn't get a little bit more SEC attention. He did get a lot of Power 4 offers, but he is a lot like Goody, man. He is a burner. Every single one of his clips seems to be him running with 15 yards of separation. As Norvell said, he's the type of receiver that they're used to getting. I asked Norvell yesterday if the change in offensive philosophy impacted recruiting at all, and he said not really. He's like, yeah, it's something we had to talk about with some of these guys, but they're still going after the same caliber of player. Defensively in the secondary, you had D'Angelo Higgins Jr., safety at a Silverado High School in Las Vegas, program that has sent a ton of successful players to the next level. He picked CSU over UNLV, over Utah, over a couple of West Coast offers there. Nice little poll for the Rams. John Smith, guy that played receiver and DB in Texas. He comes over from Baytown High School, 6'2", 190. He runs really well. I like the caliber of athlete that they got. I think this is a pretty well-rounded class. I thought they did a good job of targeting positions of need and going out and adding depth to key areas, offensive line, defensive line. The secondary is the area I think they need to target the most moving forward. That and probably interior defensive line. They're losing Cam Baratow. They're losing James Mitchell, Prendergast, and Pukesi Fakauta, and all those guys are one and done. So they're going to need to add some depth there. And it's tough because defensive tackle outside of quarterback is probably the toughest position to recruit in football. It's like versatile fives in basketball. Everybody wants a 5 that can dunk on your face and shoot threes, but the big schools tend to stockpile them. The Rams were in on some pretty good defensive linemen, at least in the conversation with them last cycle. And a lot of those guys ended up going to schools like Ole Miss and places like that because they can just throw cash at them. And that's, how it tends to work out. I would hope that some of these guys consider what is the best landing spot for me where I can prove myself. The money might be a nice little short-term influx of cash, but long-term, the real money's in the NFL. And that's where, guys like Torrey Horton just got it more than some of these other guys. I can be king of the castle here, or I can just be one in a bunch, in the P4. Some of these guys just need to consider that. But I do think the secondary and the interior defensive line will be a big point of emphasis. I think you're going to probably have to add at least 1 or 2 starters to the offensive line via the portal. I know they are excited about a lot of these guys coming up. Ader Urion Baranchea is a guy who I think has a really bright future. Aaron Karras was awesome this year. Morley really stepped up. Like, they've got some really intriguing talent coming up through the trenches. You're just going to need to be able to bolster the depth a little bit, I think, to feel comfortable. And I trust the staff to do so. They've done a great job of going out and identifying offensive line talent. I'm excited. I'm excited about what they're building. I do think it has been an NFL draft-esque way of looking at things, and they've had success there. And I think Norvell's time with the Colts and Raiders has really been beneficial for him in the college ranks, just in kind of seeing things a little bit differently than maybe some of those other coaches do out there. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat. Appreciate you rocking with us this morning. I'll get to your question here, Mile High Minute. Any update on what bowl it's looking like we're going to end up playing in? Who's going to step in as defensive coordinator for the bowl? That's a great question. I should have talked about that earlier. What I've heard is it'll be linebackers coach Adam Pillapil, and I believe that he will be in the running for the gig full time as well. He's considered a rising star in the industry. I think he's a really good coach, bright future. I think he'll be in the mix. I do wonder if they want someone with more experience, but I think if you could hang on to him, he would be big. I assume that Marcus Patton, the DB coach, will be moving on as well. He was kind of Freddie Banks' right-hand man, so I don't anticipate he'll be back. As far as the bowl outcome goes, I saw some people tweeting that they had heard rumors about CSU receiving an invite to the Potato Bowl. I have heard nothing of the sort. I don't know. I haven't heard anything like that. Everything I have heard for a week now is that everybody anticipates in the program it'll be the Arizona Bowl. So that's what I anticipate. I think it'll be the Arizona Bowl against Miami of Ohio, the best team out of the MAC. That is my guess in the end. All right, we are going to get out of here in just a second. I did want to give one last Mountain West Power Ranking. If you've got any questions, comments, fun stuff like that, throw them my way. We'll get to as many as we can in the Toyota chat before we get out of here. Always appreciate you guys rocking with me. And again, I will be going live tomorrow morning at 10 as well to talk more about signing day, to talk more about these signings a little bit more in depth, and continue to talk about what the positions of need will be for this roster moving forward. And obviously that conversation is going to be kind of ever changing, because there will be more portal departures as this goes on. They'll add more guys. That'll be a big part of it as well. But let's do this Mountain West Power Ranking ahead of the Mountain West Championship game, which I'll talk a little bit about tomorrow as well. Starting at the bottom, we've got Nevada and San Diego State, both rocking 6-game losing streaks. San Diego State gets the narrow jump ahead of Nevada simply because Nevada went winless against the conference slate. I do think that Jeff Choate was a good hire. I think he's building something there, assuming that they can retain their talent, but kind of came out hot and then didn't really have the depth to finish it off. That's going to happen. San Diego State, they just suffered some lumps. I mean, when you play a true freshman quarterback, there's going to be highs and lows. They've lost some guys in the portal, though, so it could be kind of an interesting season or an interesting cycle for the Aztecs. I'll put Wyoming at 10 after a big upset win on the road over Washington State, who fell apart as the season went on. Hawaii pulled off the end-of-year win as well, upsetting New Mexico at home, keeping New Mexico out of a bowl second year in a row that they were able to do that. That game, a lot more fun to stay up late night and watch on a tablet when it's not your school that's battling for bowl eligibility, when it's not their season that's on the line. The island is where your bowl dreams go to die. That's just the reality. Air Force, I've got them at 8, 4-game win streak. They finished 5-7. As bad as they looked in September, I mean, looked as bad as they had been since 2013, that 2-win season. Man, did they close the season strong. And they looked legitimately, not just like a fluky team or anything like that. They looked competitively sound by the end of the season. I don't think Air Force is going to be a fun matchup next year. And I think we're going to look back on this last year and say that that was a big moment for the Rams. I think that win over the Falcons in hindsight may be a little bit more impressive than they got credit for. Utah State coming in at 7. They were a fun watch in a bad year, an explosive offense, capable of hanging with anybody. Defensively, they were flawed, and it's why they didn't end up making the postseason. But Utah State and New Mexico might be objectively the most fun watches in the entire conference, just because of their crazy offenses and what they do. but also kind of a perfect argument of why CSU benefited stylistically by playing a more possession-based football and, controlling and dictating the tempo and running the ball. Like, those shootouts are cool if you don't have the defense, though, to back it up. It's a hard way to sustain success. I've got Fresno State at 5, which might be controversial because they won head-to-head over both 4 and 3. That said, I feel like the party's over. Mikey Keene has entered the transfer portal, so he won't be playing in the bowl game. Malik Sherrod, their star running back, Jalen Moss, their best receiver, all portal bound. We'll see what happens there. Fresno State usually is able to remain relatively competitive, but I do wonder if that's kind of a program who's seen the best days under Tedford and maybe are in for a rough stretch here the next couple of years. San Jose State, we've got at 4 and CSU at 3. We've talked a lot about tiers throughout the season. I think the top 2 are kind of in their own tier. I think 3 through 5 or 6, depending on how you look at it, are in their own tier. Then 7 through 9, maybe 7 through 10, and then 11 and 12 are kind of their own tiers at this point. Fresno, San Jose State, CSU, all right there in the same vein. I think any of them are capable of beating each other on any given day. And that's kind of how it played out there. We got UNLV at 2. They're rocking a 4-game win streak, coming in hot. Boise State, 10 wins in a row. What does GNT have left in the tank? I think that's the ultimate question going into the Mountain West Championship. UNLV, they made GNT work really hard in that matchup. I think Barry Odom defensively, they're going to throw some things at the Broncos. Can Madsen continue to make big throws? He's been pretty big down the stretch. I've been kind of dismissive of him as a big time quarterback. I think he's a great game manager, a great game manager, but I don't think he is a guy that inspires a ton of fear in you defensively in terms of ripping a throw. Like, I don't think he's making a 93-yard, touchdown in between cover 2 like Bo Nix did. I think he's a little bit limited, but he's been good as the season has gone on. GNT has obviously been their entire offense. That's the key to me. If UNLV can make Boise State one-dimensional, I think they have a good shot to win that game. And if that's the case, I'm really interested to see, does the Mountain West get 2 playoff teams in? Because they have essentially stated, this selection committee has said that if you're in the top 10 right now, which Boise State is, it's more playing for seeding than playing for your actual spot in the title game. Is there a world in which both get in? We shall see. I don't know if they would actually stick to that for the Mountain West, but it seems like it could be a possibility. Taylor says thoughts on the Open Doors partnership with NIL. It's good. Any opportunity that increases your NIL is good for the program. Anything that, is going to give you more resources there, allow you to retain players better, I'm all for it. Lean into anything and everything that you can in the NIL space and try and keep these players happy, because it's a constant battle. Not only are you trying to recruit, high school kids right now, you're trying to recruit your own players and make sure they stick around, which is what the staff is definitely in the process of doing right now, kind of in some ongoing negotiations with some of these guys. All right, that's all I've got for you guys this morning. We'll be live again tomorrow. Shout out to everybody for keeping up with all the content. Shout out to Riley behind the sticks, our producer, making all of this possible. Always proud to be y'all. Much love. Peace.